Thanks for the introduction. My today's talk will be about quantitative attack tree analysis, and let's have a look at where we're all doing this.
But that's not proven.
It's just science, man. It's a theory.
Yes, but of course these days you hear quite often in the news that this or that system has been attacked by hackers, such as the Pentagon, or even connecting cars. Suppose you're driving in your Google car and then someone hacks into your system and starts driving you to whatever, to
the
wherever
Pentagon.
they want. The Pentagon. So security is, of course, increasingly seen as a very important topic to work on. So then, if we look at how we can prevent such attacks, there's lots of options what you can do. You can do firewalls, encryption, good software updates, you can monitor what's happening in your system, you can, very importantly, screen your personnel before you hire them, train your personnel, having all kinds of access policies on your buildings, etc. But the question is, if you are a security officer, which of all those measures will you implement? And and in order to answer that, you need to know which threats are the most dangerous, the most likely, the fastest, etc. And here it's important to, if you're doing this kind of security analyses, it's very important to realize that social factors are as important as technical factors, or even more important, and also that all this, the potential attacks and also the countermeasures that you're going to take really depend on the attacker profile. So governments, secret agencies, connected to governments, they have much different possibilities and incentives than script kiddies who's trying to hack into your system. So it's very important to distinguish between various attacker profiles and look at a per profile basis of what are reasonable countermeasures. What's also what people do in practice a lot is that then rather than perfectly protecting your system against all possible attacks is look at the business case for attackers. What is their incentive? What kind of reward and what they want to gain with the attack? And again, this is much different for script kiddies than for government or for criminals, for cyber criminals. And now if we look at how can we best secure our cyber-physical system, then we see that there's quite a lot of standards that tell you how to do a security analysis and how to properly protect your asset. And if you look at those standards, what you often see is the following: that all of them have some identification phase where they identify what are the risks. Then they analyze the risk and they look at countermeasures, they evaluate the risk and they treat the risk, meaning they do countermeasures. I mean, this is from the FAIR, from one particular standard called FAIR, and they propose 7 steps. You do an action analysis, you present the target of your analysis to the customer, you do a target description, you get that approved. Then, importantly, you do a risk identification, and here you can use various methods such as threat diagrams. And here you do the risk evaluation based on those threat diagrams. And by which I want to say, so there are many standards out there, but many of them have the same ingredients that boil down to identify your risks, prioritize their risks, and treat the risks. And basically, what you can say that if you look at current risk analysis methods for security, you can basically distinguish 2 broad groups. One of them is more semi-structured, semi-formal techniques, and another group is more is more formal, more model-based techniques. So here you have various methods based on spreadsheets. For instance, the FAIR methods. You have also a kind of FMIA kind of analysis. They can be either qualitative or quantitative. And if you look at their pros and cons, then you see that those semi-structured techniques are relatively easy and quickly carried out. They are more, but they are more subjective, more informal, and also they provide very limited insights in the dependencies between various attack steps. They basically treat all the attack steps in a sequential way, but they don't consider that how they mutually influence each other. Because it's more text-based, more linear, there's not really a hierarchy or so. But as I said, they are relatively lightweight, and that's what makes them also popular in practice. Then if you look at model-based techniques, then we see that the landscape is dominated by attack trees and attack graph-like formalisms. Many of those attack trees are integrated within architectural approaches. So those architectural approaches, they take the system architecture as a starting point and then look from this architecture which are the kind of attacks that can be performed, well, either on their own or in combination with those other formalisms. And then if you look at their pros and cons, of course the modeling takes effort, so this requires more modeling effort. But they provide a more explicit modeling of the dependencies, and also they are more objective, or at least they're more traceable how people came to their security arguments. And those attack trees, this is the topic of my talk. Yes?
Can I ask about attack trees, graphs, and defense trees? I assume there's attack trees, making a tree of how they might attack, right? And defense trees, how you might defend. Mm-hmm. Do graphs span those two?
Yeah, well there is, so attack trees, as the word says, they are trees. So they often don't have cycles, and attack graphs in general may have cycles. There's also attack defense trees that combine the two.
So these are explicitly decision trees, are they?
They are kind of decision trees, but I'll give an example in a few slides. So now, those attack trees, well, they were coined in the 90s and late 80s by Bruce Schneider. As I said, they are trees, or more general, they are, since subtrees can be shared, they are directed acyclic graphs. In their basic forms, they contain AND and OR gates, but many extensions exist. And they resemble fault trees. And fault trees, this is a very prominent formalism that is used for safety assessment. So this stems from the 50s. It was developed by NASA and Boeing. And if you look at how safety is achieved in nuclear industry, this is by fault trees. And then people started to realize that rather than looking at accidental faults, those trees could also be used to represent malicious attacks. As I said, there are many extensions to those rather basic attack trees that have only AND and ORs. There are new gates, sequential ANDs, sequential ORs, there are defenses, countermeasures, it's a whole forest here. And there are many analyses possible. So you could look at costs, what is the most expensive attack, or the cheapest attack for the attacker, or what is the most costly attack for yourself, what is the fastest attack, what's the most likely attack, and what is the most risky attack. And then risk is, the standard definition for risk is that you multiply probability times impact. So let's now finally look at an example. Suppose you want to have a free conference dinner. Suppose you're a student and your boss doesn't want to pay for your conference dinner, but you still want to get in. What do you do? Well, then you can do either of three things. You can sneak in, you can forge a ticket, or you can steal a ticket. And this is an OR gate here, because, well, you either do this or that, then you do know this by an OR gate. Now,
But is it exclusive for?
no, you can also do all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's yeah. So,
But you don't.
well, if you want to sneak in, well, then you have to do two things. You have to dress nicely and smile. And since you have to do both of them, this is represented by an AND gate. Well, if you want to forge a ticket, what do? Well, you find someone with a ticket, and you prepare a fake ticket yourself, and you have to print that ticket. And again, this is an AND gate here. Now, if you want to steal a ticket, well, again, you have the same basic attack step as before. You have to find someone with a ticket and steal that person's ticket. And now we see why attack trees are in general not trees, but directed acyclic graphs, because in general leaves or even complete subtrees can be shared within this tree. Then there's one other thing that is important to realize, namely that those gates here are not quite regular AND gates, but rather they are a sequential version of it. So because if you want to forge a ticket, you have to carry out all those steps, but you have to carry them out in a particular order. So first you have to find someone with a ticket, and only then you have to prepare your own ticket, and only then you have to print it. So this is denoted by a sequential AND. The same holds for stealing a ticket. You first have to find something with a ticket, and only then you can, of course, steal that person's ticket. Yeah, then if you look at what many analysis techniques do, they equip all those basic attack steps with some quantitative attributes. And those can be cost, probability, time, or whatever. And what you can then do is you can propagate the values bottom up. So you start from the leaves, and the n is then, for instance, a maximum or a plus. If it's time, it can be plus, or if you do it in parallel, it can be the maximum. Sequential AND can also be plus, etc. This is very fast. It's an easy method. It's also flexible, because in general you need mathematically you need your values to be a lattice, and then everything works. However, there are two things that you cannot do. So handling shared leaves is difficult with this bottom-up method, and also it's hard to do constraint optimization. So yeah, what we do instead is we like shared leaves, and we also like constraint optimization. So what we do is we use timed model checking to do this kind of quantitative analysis. So those are the attack tree gates. You've already seen the AND and the OR. There's also a sequential version of the OR. That wasn't in the example, but those are called static gates, because the order doesn't matter. And here we have the dynamic gates, in which the order matters. Then what we have done is that we looked at several attacker profiles, and each profile comes with different values for the leaves. And what you can do is then you can compute for those values various quantitative attributes for those profiles: the minimum time to attack, the risk appetite, the cost to the company, and the cost to the attacker. And then for another profile, your landscape may look different. Maybe the cost for the attacker is higher, but the minimum attack is lower. You need less of a risk appetite, and may also lead to lower cost to the company. An important question is, of course, how to get to those attacker profiles, but here again there are standard ones. One is a standard attacker profile is developed by IBM. It's called TARA. There's also different options. One is called MORDA, and at least you can use standard techniques here. And yes, of course you can then have different queries, different metrics. And again, risk appetite is again one of those social attributes that are very important in practice. So what is the risk that the attacker is willing to take?
Couldn't also be the risk the company's willing to take? Or is that the output?
What's that?
There's also a risk that the company's willing to take.
Yeah.
So if it's me, someone can hack my server, I don't really care. Yeah, but I don't have a bank, so. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that can be another. I mean, there's so many attributes.
So it would just be a fifth dimension, or a
yeah.
fifth axis,
yeah.
if you want to.
Exactly. Yeah. No, certainly. That's definitely a good point. So what do we do? So we don't do this bottom-up procedure, but rather we take a compositional approach. So what we do is we have each element in the attack tree. So being it a leaf or a gate, we translate that into a model, into a label transition type model. So in the coming slides, I will look at timed automata, price timed automata in particular. So each of those get their own model. What we do then is we compute.
So each thing is translated into an LTS.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And they communicate via signals. So they propagate the attacker's success. So if this step is successfully attacked, it notifies this gate here, because that guy needs to know whether this guy has failed. So the attack signals are propagated, and if this gate fails, it notifies this.
I'm still a little bit confused. So each gate is modeled by an LTS.
Yeah.
And then what are the other arrows outside the LTS?
Those?
No, on the right.
Those?
Yeah, what are those arrows?
Yeah, so LTSs, they can synchronize on their actions.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
So we take the parallel composition of these LTSs. Yeah. And then we put everything into Upal Cora in this case. That is a model checker that can do timed analysis for you. And then what we obtain from Upal is a trace that corresponds to an attack path in your system. So so you have your small LTSs, you build from that a large LTS, and in that LTS you can find path. And every path to a success state corresponds to a successful attack in your system, and then you can do optimization. And so what is my shortest path with the minimal number of steps? What is my time shortest path? So the path that needs the least time. What is my cost optimal path? And of course here we provide an optimization criterion, and we also provide an attacker profile that sets here the values of the basic attack steps.
And what do you mean by compositional here?
Yeah, by compositional, it's basically compositional modeling, because rather than building one big model out of this attack tree, you could build one big.
So is it true, like I could take parts of the thing on the left and you could sort of somehow compose and you still preserve the structure, or?
Yeah, yes. So I have a, yes. Yeah, how to say this? So what you can do is you can compose all those models one by one. So you can compose those two and then compose it with this one and with this one, etc.
But the hierarchy isn't strictly graph compositionality.
Well, so in this case I have 6 models and I need to somehow compose it. And there's several options, and depending on your question and your exact model, it may be profitable to either compose everything at once, but later in my talk I will also show you why it's not always a good idea to compose everything at once. You could also first compose those 2 systems, then compose it with this one, then with this one, etc.
But they also need to be synchronized. Right?
Yeah. So I'll show I'll show those models in a few slides. So
Okay.
maybe your question gets answered then, and if not, then ask me again.
Okay.
So, but let's first look at the kind of questions we can answer, and then the models come. So first of all, what we can do is we can compute optimal attack values. So, meaning, for instance, the minimum time, budget, skill level, maximal damage to reach the goal. But those optimal values can also be constrained in the other variables. So, maybe you can ask, give me the minimal time needed to attack this system, but you can also ask, give me the minimal time to attack this system, given that my budget is smaller than such and such, or given that my skill level is less than that. So you can constrain. In general, you can solve constraint optimization problems. Again, given an attacker profile. And with each constraint optimization problem, it comes with an attack path. So if you have found if you say your minimum time to attack your system is 2 hours, then also the model checker will give you a path that realizes this constraint value. And what you can then, of course, do is the ranking and prioritizing your attack path. So what is the cheapest attack? What is the second cheapest attack? What is the third cheapest attack? Etc. And in this way, you can also compute Pareto frontiers if you optimize multiple values and see how they relate. And as I said, price timed automata are, in my opinion, a very natural way to do it, because they allow a natural translation into these automata. It's flexible, it's easy to extend, and it gives you many analytical abilities. Yes, so this is the same picture as before. So let's now first look at, I translate each leaf and each gate into a price-timed automaton. What is in the first place a price-timed automaton? Well, price-timed automata are finite state machines or linear transition systems, but they are extended with clock variables, and those clocks they record the progress of time, and they can be used to specify enabling conditions for your actions and also deadlines in your states. Further, so this is timed automata. If you also want to have prices with that, then you can use cost variables to represent how, let's say, the price of the transition. And you can use those cost variables in two ways. Either they accumulate over transitions, or you incur cost while you're sitting in a state. So, meaning that if you take a transition, you may need to pay a certain price, and if you're staying in a state for some time, you also need. You will also incur some costs depending on how long you stay in that state. And that is linear in your residence time in your state. So here you see a lamp. It has 3 states. It can be either off, it can be low, or it can be bright. And if you, the idea is that if you press the button, it will switch from off to low. And if you press it quickly enough, then it will move to the bright state. And in the low, in the state low, it consumes less energy than in the bright state. So here you see that your cost is 10. Your cost derivative is 10, meaning you incur 10, let's say, joule per second, and here you get cost is 20, so you incur 20 joule per second. And in the off stage, this cost doesn't cost anything, and here clicking the first time on the press button costs you 50 joules. And then of course you can look what is the cheapest way to reach my bright state. Yeah, and since you can here you see here you see a guard saying you can only take this transition when your clock is 5, so you have to spend some time in this transition, in this state here. And then you can compose those time automata if you have a user model that presses the press button all the time. Then you synchronize on this action label here. So whenever this automaton takes this transition, that one has to synchronize on the transition and also move to a different state. Yeah, so now let's look at the model for an AND gate. So the model for an AND gate, it waits basically to be activated by its parent gate. Then, once it has been activated, it activates all its children. Further, it waits for either the success or the failure of its children, and once it has been successful, it propagates its success. So it starts here in the initial state, and it waits for an activation signal that is sent by its parent in the tree. If it has received this activation signal, then it sends out the same, it starts activating the children. So in this case, there are 2 children called C1 and C2. And you also see that those 2 states are urgent, meaning that you cannot spend any time in this state. Whenever you get in this state, you have to move out immediately, because, well, once you're activated, you want to activate your children immediately, and you don't want to spend any time. And this activation signal, what is it used for? This is used in the sequential AND, because in the sequential AND, you don't, you execute your children one by one. So you first, when your attack starts, you first activate your left child. When your left child has been successful, then you activate your second child, and that starts activating. Once the second child is done, you activate your third child, and in each of those, during each of those activations, or at least in the path between activation and between success, your children may incur all kinds of costs, and those costs get then all added together.
So I don't see why you need sort of the time, right? Because there you could it's just sequence, right? I mean, why do you need the time?
Because each of those basic attack steps needs time to be executed.
Yeah.
And some of them may fail.
But why do you need to quantify the time? Because like in the example you were saying, I could, find a person, then I could find, get a ticket, and there's no specific timing there,
It could
right?
take you maybe an hour to find the person, and then seconds. So you could have a sequence of 3 things very fast, and
Okay.
one
You
thing
might
could
have
happen
time
long.
limits, like you have to get it before the actual dinner starts.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's the
it's a
interesting
time.
bit. I mean, I think on a more top level, you can answer this easier because it's quite good to have time in a sort of attack analysis. I think it's often a constraint which you want to meet.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things it is like attacker's time. Yeah. So what's the fastest attack, and that could that is not necessarily the number of steps. It's some steps.
No, but at least I didn't see it in this model, but I
Yeah,
can see
right.
why it's
Yeah.
I think
why it's
it's
useful.
probably
Yeah.
not coming out of the model, but it's
Yeah.
sort of something like you want
Sure.
on the outside.
Yeah.
So-
No,
So,
you're
by
right.
the way, you have to, I think, dress nicely first before you smile, right? Otherwise,
Yeah, okay.
otherwise it's useless
No.
smiling.
Yes.
You have to be smiling and dressed nicely in both the continuous
Yeah.
state value.
No, you have to do
It's not
one
order.
first. I think if you're dressed
No.
badly
Yeah.
and then you're smiling, then
You dress better if you smile.
Actually, that
You should try it, Raja.
This is maybe a point actually with the bottom-up propagation. I guess in these sorts of examples, it's often easier to find a likelihood or some sort of cost associated with something higher up in the hierarchy than with the leaves. it'd be fairly easy to work out how many people snuck into a conference, but pretty hard to work out the likelihood of someone dressing nicely and smiling.
Yeah, but I think that's exactly the point. Suppose that you discover that many people sneak in, and you're organizing as a conference organizer. You see all those people, and then you start. You want to prevent that. So what are you going to do? Then you can start an attack tree here, and of course this is a very small one because otherwise it didn't fit on this sheet. But you start in a top-down way, thinking, how could people sneak in my my conference, and what can I do about this? Should I be?
But it's probably easier to stop people sneaking in than it is to stop people dressing nicely or smiling.
Yes.
Sure, yeah, but okay, but you're
So
right.
in other words, it's bottom-up propagation that's maybe
But, no,
the remote inspiration.
so I agree with your argument, but I don't agree with your conclusion. Because I think if you want to prevent people from sneaking in, what could be done, that you have better access policies to see who comes in. And then I think if you make a more realistic attack tree here, then and you refine it in a proper way, then you can also think better of which countermeasures to take.
Again, that process of refinement might actually be quite hard top down. In other words, you can be more certain the higher up in the hierarchy that you've got the process of refinement right, but the lower you go, there's potentially more of a potential for error.
Yeah, but yes, but still I think it's good to refine as much as possible, and also you have to weigh the cost of extra security at your door against, well, the value of one conference dinner. So in that sense, yeah.
Yeah, so you could, the question, how do you stop people sneaking in? It's not easy, but then if you pay attention, okay, let's just double check the tickets from those people who are smiling and dressed nicely.
My point is maybe just that it's sometimes
That's
easier to
cheaper.
propagate up and down a hierarchy rather than deciding a priori whether one's going to go bottom up or top down.
Yeah, of course, so this top-down thinking forces you to think in one direction, and it's helpful. But of course, it's not the only way. Of course, it's also good to think bottom up. What could happen in the first place, and then start, well, from both sides. And always, what I find also very important is that those models, they are good for attacks that are somehow known. If something is completely new, it's hard to model in the first place, and therefore it's very important to always think out of the box. To see new attacks.
So you can also ask people with tickets to dress badly.
Yeah.
Then you'll notice all the nicely dressed people. So, anyway.
Yes, but that is maybe, that brings me to even this is slightly funny. Brings me to another point. What is also important is that you make your attack tree, you do your analysis, you find countermeasures, and if you implement countermeasures, it's very important to re-evaluate to see if indeed the risk is the residual risk is acceptable, or maybe that with those countermeasures you actually introduced new attack possibilities. So it's important.
It's done process. And then of course, if a new attack arises, a new type of attack, you want to update your system so that it fits in.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, so where was I? Yeah, so here you, this activation is there because of the sequential AND. So once you're activated, you activate all your children. If, let's say you have 2 children and you're an AND gate, so if your first child is successful and then your second child is successful, and meaning that you get an input from your first child saying, hey people, I have this attack was successfully executed here, and also your second child does the same to you, say, hey, I have also been successfully attacked, then you propagate your success to your parent, saying you emit a success signal telling the rest of the world, hey people, now a successful attack has happened. Well, since it's an AND gate, and a regular AND gate, not a sequential AND gate, you just wait. Either your first child was successful and then your second child, or it was the other way around. Your second child was successful and then your first child was successful. And there's some business about failure as well, but it's not too exciting. So now this is the sequential